Good morning, everyone. Thanks for bearing with us with our technical difficulties. I hope you can see me up on the screen right now, and I hope you can hear me. Welcome all to Module 5 for the School of Health and Care Radicals. This is our last module out of the ones that we've been doing over the last few weeks. So we're really excited to see you all on the call this morning. So today we're talking about moving beyond the edge. Okay, so the School for Health and Care Radicals was really established to support NHS Change Day. And as I hope you all know, NHS Change Day will be happening on Monday, March 3rd. We're really excited about that. We'll be having a stand at the Healthcare Innovation Expo. So if any of you are coming to the conference, please come by our stand and visit us. We're really excited to have over 220,000 pledges that have been put onto our website, but I would encourage you all to continue to pledge. You've got time still until Monday to put your pledge on, and actually we're also encouraging people to continue to pledge until the 31st of March. So if you still need a little bit more time to think about what you're pledging, you've got that. So please go onto our website and pledge. Just for a little bit of Friday morning inspiration, here you can see Nottingham University Hospitals NHS Trust. They made an organizational pledge. It's really inspiring to see that they've got about 14,500 people across their organization that have joined this pledge. And they've been engaging and embracing staff to not only join their pledge for patients, but also to join their pledge for staff. And so you can really see that NHS Change Day and some of the work that we've been doing is a really good catalyst for change. Okay, so just the last couple of slides from me. Last year, we had about 40% of people who took action made their pledge online. So we really don't want you to miss out and we wanted to make sure that you can put your pledge online if you're planning on making a pledge. So if you go to our website, which is www.changeday.nhs.uk, that's where you can log in and make your pledge, and it's really a quick and easy process. Shouldn't take you very much time at all to go on and do that. Okay, and so for today, getting on with today for our content, really we want to encourage you to use the chat box as much as possible. So type in any questions or comments you have as we're going along. We also have a couple of hashtags we've been using on Twitter. So hashtag NHS Change Day and hashtag SHCRChat. So please go on that. We'll be monitoring Twitter and the chat box, and we have a couple of areas for feedback. We will also be producing the summary of our discussions today, and you'll see the Storify come up and some images and information on Pinterest. And also you'll receive a newsletter from Naomi, as you do over the last few weeks, later on today. And so also we're encouraging you to go onto our website where you can also add comments onto our chat forum. Okay, so we're on Module 5 now, moving beyond the edge. We've had an exciting 5 weeks where we've been going through all of this content. And please go online. We've got all the WebExes recorded. They're all posted on the resources section of our website, and you can access all of that material anytime that you would like to. Okay, so Helen, I'm hoping you're with us on the call right now, and I'm handing over to you. Sorry, guys, just bear with us for a second.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Helen.
Oh, that's a relief. Hi. Just had a few little problems this morning, so it's great to be able to speak. So if I could have the next slide. So just a little bit around our agenda today, and how we're seeking to pull everything together. And what we want to do, first of all, is to review some of the content that we've learned so far, and focusing this on the characteristics of a transformational change agent. What does the evidence tell us around what it takes to be a really great health and care radical? Then we're going to have a panel discussion around radicals going forward, and how we might utilise some of the things that we've learned. After that, we're going to hand back to me, and we're going to talk about, we're calling it From the Edge, and it's a perspective on the emerging direction for change and change agents. We're then going to have another panel, which is stories about change agents who are part of our community who have gone beyond the edge. Then it's back to me again, and what I want to do is just some quick reflections around the school and what we've learnt from it. Our final panel discussion is about connecting, and we're going to learn from some of the groups and partnerships that have formed. And then finally, what next for the school? If we end up running a little bit over, just because it took us a while to get sorted out this morning, I hope that everybody will be able to stay. So, if I could have the next slide. So, what we wanted to do in this little section of the last module was really try and pull things together, and thinking about everything that we've learned and that we've thought about in the last 4 weeks. What do we know about the characteristics of a radical change agent in health and care? If I could have the next slide. So, one of the things that we've done often over the last 4 weeks is that we tried to use models and theories and frameworks very successfully. So I wanted to find an appropriate model that, in a sense, would be the structure that we could hang together our pulling together comments. And the one that I chose is from Peter Fuda. Peter Fuda is a transformational expert thinker from Australia. And based on his research, he's pulled together a framework around transformational change agents. And he talks about 3 levels. The first one, or the top one, is about doing, which is about skills and methods for change. The middle one is about seeing, and about our ability as change agents to be able to make sense of reality and, in a sense, create different realities for people. And then the final one, the baseline, is about being, which is about personal characteristics and qualities of me as a change agent. If I could have my next slide. Now, what happens in health and care is that nearly all the focus ends up being about change agents doing. So I'd say this doing layer is where most change agents will put their effort and their emphasis. And to be honest, this is the thing that other people judge us on. So the people that employ us as change agents, or hold us to account for our performance as change agents, they'll judge us on what we do. And as a result, often it's what we perceive that we have to do in order to add value to our organisations or systems. And actually, when you look at most courses about change and improvement, they focus on doing. And the final thing I wanted to just say about it now is that we talked last week about shared purpose, and the difference between shared purpose, which is our higher purpose, the thing we're actually trying to achieve, and de facto purpose, which is the purpose that, in a sense, the false purpose that gets in the way. And what I'd say about doing is that often it becomes the de facto purpose, our equivalent of a de facto purpose as a health and care radical. So if I could have the next slide. And what I'd say, and I think the big message from the last 4 weeks, is that yes, doing as a change agent is really important, but we have to build it on strong foundations of seeing and being as change agents. And that actually, if we focus on building really strong foundations for our doing through being and seeing, then as change agents we'll get better outcomes, we'll get better engagement from people, and it'll be better for us in terms of our experience as change agents. So what I'd like to do now is to just very quickly go through each of these 3 levels and relate them back to what we've been doing over the last 4 weeks. And what I want to do is actually do things the other way up. So I'd like to start with being. So if I could have the next slide. So, being is about our personal characteristics and qualities as a change agent, and that's something we've talked about a lot in the last 4 weeks. If I could have the next slide. There's some really nice references this week in the study guide, and one of them is an essay by Bryce Williams, and it's called Working Out Loud, and I love the idea of working out loud. That means that in terms of what I do every day and the way that I do it, I'm kind of sending messages about what's important. And Bryce Williams says that being an effective change agent requires us to demonstrate what we teach as much as kind of preaching to people and pontificating from mountaintops. And if we're saying to other people, well, you need to change your processes, or you need to change your relationships, or you need to change your behaviour, what we've got to be able to do is to represent that in our own work and share the outcomes of our own work. So I think, yeah, this concept of living out loud is really good. So let's look at, or let's refresh, what we've thought about being over the last 4 weeks. If I could have the next slide. And, it's this whole idea about, being the change that I want to see in the world, this idea that change begins with me. So it's about living my convictions and values and demonstrating my convictions and values in everything that I do. It's about building this very strong sense of self-efficacy, and we talked about that a lot in Module 1, and that's about, my belief that I personally can make the change that I want to make. Being a health and care radical is about, working constantly with shared purpose and higher goals, and not just a de facto purpose. So this isn't about saving money or hitting a performance target or reducing length of stay, although those things are important, but those things are only on the way to our bigger purpose. When we're being a health and care radical, we're a role model. We're saying to other people around us, this is how we should behave. And we're signal generators. We talked about that, that as change leaders, we're sending signals all the time about what really matters. It's also about stepping outside of my comfort zone. And I found a really nice example of this last week on Twitter that came from NHS Change Day. So if I could just have the next slide, I'd like to show you this. And Ewan Ellis sent this, and he talked about stepping out of our comfort zone. And he says, all the concepts about stepping out of your comfort zone mean nothing until you decide that your essential purpose, your visions and goals are more important than your self-imposed limitation. I thought that was a really lovely way of putting it. And in a sense, change begins with me. It's how I feel about the world, and in a sense, the extent to which I role model the behaviours that I want other people to exhibit. If I could have the next slide. Another really important concept around being as a health and care radical is about being a rebel or a radical rather than a troublemaker. And again, we looked at this in week 1, and we used a very nice framework from Lois Kelly. Again, if we can have the slide. And what we did is that we looked at the difference between a rebel and a troublemaker. And, we talked about a rebel or a radical as being somebody who creates new things, is very passionate, is focused on the mission of the organisation, who's optimistic, who generates energy, versus a troublemaker who's somebody who complains and whinges, feels a strong sense of injustice, but it's about myself, I'm angry, I'm pessimistic, I sap energy. So, I guess the question for us is, how can we, as health and care radicals, live the rebel, the radical perspective constantly. If I could have the next slide. And then finally, it's about in situations, often where people aren't doing the things that we want them to do, or they're not playing ball, rather than judging people and putting horrible labels on them, labels like, in denial, or laggard, or renegade, or resistor. Actually, we're saying, well, what's going on here, and how can we learn from it? So, that, in a sense, is my summary of being. And do you know what's lovely is that people are putting lots of other aspects of being in the chat box. And please carry on doing that. That's really fantastic. So let's look at the next category. And this is about seeing, and very much how we view the world. And it's about our ability as a change agent to make sense of and shape reality. And we particularly when we talk about rolling with resistance and the perspective with which we see the idea of resistance. If I could have the next slide. And I found this really nice poem, and it's a 16th century Spanish quatrain, and I am not going to attempt it in Spanish, but the English translation, I think, is really beautiful. And it says, "In this world of many mazes, there is nothing false or true. All depends upon the hue of the glass through which one gazes." So how we see the world, the lens with which we look at it, makes a massive difference to how we approach change. So if I could have the next. So when we talk about seeing as a change agent, I think there are lots of perspectives. Seeing is about we're looking, we're monitoring, we're listening, we're perceiving the reality of what's going on, and we're feeling things intuitively, and all these things are aspects of seeing. And I think what we've been saying is that in our role as change agents, we want to build in time so that we can actually do this, because it makes a very big difference to our ability to deliver change. And just an example of this, if I could have the next slide. When you actually kind of look in the literature around change agents, it's really interesting. And this is a classic definition. We've talked a lot about change agents. What is a change agent? And this definition, often the person given the job of implementing and leading the change is called the change agent. And that is a definition of a change agent that comes from an external lens. That there is this process of change, and a person is kind of given the job by somebody else to do it. Okay, and this is an external lens, but also we could take an internal lens of this to say, I am a change agent because actually it's my calling as a clinician or as a leader to really strive to make a difference. They're very, very different perspectives, very different lenses on being a change agent. If I could have the next slide. And again, in week 1, we looked at this lovely piece of prose from David White, who's a corporate poet, and he said, "I do not think that you can really deal with change without a person asking real questions about who they are and how they belong in the world." So seeing isn't just about how we see the world around us and how we see the people around us, but seeing is also about how we see ourselves and how we perceive ourselves. If I could have the next slide. So, these are some of the aspects of seeing that we talked about in the last 4 weeks. So we talked about seeing the big picture, not just rushing in and doing a change in a little corner of some process or, some aspect of care, but actually being able to stand back and really see and understand the big picture. And it was about our ability to have multiple perspectives on that. Part of seeing, when we talked about in Module 3, was about the positive intention of others. So that where people are being difficult or not playing ball with the change that we're trying to lead, rather than thinking negatively or judging them, actually let's start from the perspective that people have got a positive intention in what they're doing, that they've actually got a noble purpose in their actions, and let's actually try and see or understand what that is. And let's understand that often when people are resisting, it's because of the way that we're going about the change process, rather than the fact that there's some kind of personality flaw or character trait that makes that person resistant. Seeing is about possibilities. It's about hopeful futures. How could this be? Creative opportunities and potential. Seeing is thinking about different paradigms for change at the same time. And again, in week 3, we talked about diagnostic and dialogic approaches to resistance. And actually we said that we need to work with both. So in a sense, as a change agent, we need to be able to see multiple paradigms. And then finally, seeing is about seeing myself in the context of my higher purpose. So not getting embroiled in petty discussions or arguments or sweating small stuff, but actually being able to continually see myself in terms of my higher purpose as a leader or agent of change. If I could have the next slide. So finally, we come to doing. And again, just to reiterate that when we talk about doing and the actions of doing, very much seeing them in the context of seeing and being. If I could have the next slide. So, what kind of doing should I be doing as a health and care radical? So the first thing is about creating the conditions where everybody can contribute and do their best. It's about, building scenarios of trust, of courage, of being willing to take a risk. And actually, where being and doing come together is about being the kind of role model that, I show that I'm willing to go the extra mile, that I'm willing to take a risk. Okay. Doing is about joining forces with other people to create action. We talked about this in Module 2. And, what we said is that you can't be a radical on your own. Both in Modules 1 and 2, we talked about the importance of achieving small wins. Making change happen that creates a sense of hope and possibility, self-efficacy, that word again, and confidence with other people. We need to take actions as doers that appeal both to the head, which is about working in very logical ways, having very good planning, program management systems, working very well with data, and with the heart, which is about how we connect around our shared values, how we build shared purpose, how we frame our change proposition to appeal to both head and heart, and how we build relationships. Another key aspect of doing is about how we make change routine. It's a thing that we do every day. It isn't an exceptional activity or something we bolt on, but it's part of everything we do every day. And we also talked about how we build learning cycles from change. So, constantly trying things out, testing them, finding out if they work. And then finally, in terms of doing, we talked about the need to work with models and theories and frameworks and methodologies effectively. And if I could have the next slide. And we looked at a number of different models. So in week 1, we looked at a model that was about knowing and doing and living and being change. In week 3, we looked, and in the context of rolling with resistance, we looked at the stages of change model and talked about understanding where people are. And last week, in week 4, we talked about using the NHS change model and how we make sure that we build all 8 components of the NHS change model into change. And one of the things that we said early on is that all models are wrong and some of them are useful. So what we need to do as change agents and health and care radicals is to find the models that will work for us. So if I could just have the last slide. So just thinking about this and this model around doing and seeing and being, just want to take a minute really. What's your sense of that, around what we need to do as health and care radicals and how we underpin our doing with really effective, clear seeing and very powerful being. So just going to give you a minute. Just be great to kind of get your reactions on that. And the conclusions that we have to draw from it. That's lovely. You don't have to change everything in the world to change the world. Any other conclusions? Yeah, that's great. Colm talks about the need for conclusions. And Victoria says, live the change you want to be. Beautiful. Yeah. If it is to be, it is up to me, and it's okay to ask for help. That's really fantastic. Okay, come to Melvis. I think we're going to have a few musical aspects. These are really lovely, and I would hope what we'll try and do as well is if many of you can actually, put a conclusion in the chat box. What we'll do is I would love us to capture these. Yeah, I like, don't ask permission. That's great. Listening instead of talking. This is really great from Sarah. Doing only is like constructing a building without a foundation. I think that's true. And yet when I go around, for instance, in my world in the NHS, I think it is more the norm to really focus big transformational change efforts around doing than it is in building the foundations of seeing and being. And, you know, it isn't going to work. And I think that, you know, we have got a very, very big responsibility as change agents to support seeing and being. And as one of you said here, it starts with me, it starts with us. These are really great. I'm going to ask our chat monitor shortly to pick some of these up as well. So, what I'm going to do now is we're going to move to our first panel session, and I'm going to hand to Jenny.
Thank you very much, Helen. Good morning again, everybody. That picture I'm showing you on there is the Stelvio Pass in Italy, and my husband cycled up it last year, and I'm hoping that the journey of going through the school with us hasn't been quite as painful as I fear cycling up the Stelvio Pass might be. What we thought it would be really lovely to do at this point, so many of you have been so well engaged with the school, and there are lots and lots of people who have managed to make it to every single one of the live Friday web seminars. And so we thought we would ask one or two of those people to come and talk to us, and so that you can hear about the journey that a couple of individuals have been through on the school. Can I have my next slide, please? And welcome Lana to join us. Lana, do you want to just say hello, and then I'll ask you a little question. Just getting Lana unmuted momentarily. Are you there, Lana? There, that sounds hopeful. Hello, Lana. Welcome, welcome. So, Lana, can you tell us a little bit about your journey of taking part in the school? Maybe start off with telling us how you heard about it, and then what's been your most striking insight from everything you've heard so far?
Yes. Well, I'm a senior charge nurse, but currently I'm working in service development here in Dumfries and Galloway. And my mentor, Linda McKechnie, who's our service development manager, encouraged me to become involved, because normally being in the wards, this is quite a steep learning curve for me. So the school came at a very appropriate time.
Brilliant, brilliant. And you've put your key learning on your slide there. Do you want to say a little bit more about that?
Yes, I was involved in a project which very successfully completed. I built a new psychiatric hospital here in Dumfries, and my role was to be involved with all the individuals, different specialities. So that experience and also the insight from the learning, more formal understanding of the stages of change, this will stand me in good stead for what I plan to do post-school.
Brilliant, brilliant. And go on then, just tell us a little bit. So how are you going to take all this great stuff that you've learned and apply it out there in real life?
Well, we have a quality team here in Dumfries, and that involves a lot of different specialities, a lot of different departments. But currently people are working on excellent work here, but they're all doing it separately and they're not involving each other. So my vision is to look at supporting the quality team to come together and evolve into a very effective team who will take on ownership and ultimately responsibility for bringing together all the good work that's happening, and also identify common themes where they'll be working on the same things so they can work together and support each other. So I can very much identify with the stages of change now, because I feel that a lot of them are at the pre-contemplative stage, whereas now that we've had our initial meeting, people are starting to contemplate just exactly what can be done and where their role might be. So I've already started.
Fantastic. That's really great, thank you, Lana. And I just want to finish with you by saying, have you all been locked in the room to do your learning? Because I just noticed on the photo of you that the door is very firmly locked behind you. So I hope after today's web seminar you'll be allowed to leave and resume freedom. That's really lovely.
Can I in my NHS Change Day T-shirt as well? Linda and I are sporting.
We did. We did, very good. Could I have the next slide? And thank you so much, Lana. And let's welcome Susan. And Susan, lovely, are you there? Can you hear us and can we hear you?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Fantastic. Okay, marvellous, and we can hear you. So Susan, we'd love to hear about your experience of the school as well. Can you tell us a little bit about what's most struck you about the materials in the web seminars so far?
I found it absolutely eye-popping. It takes me back to courses that I did which were preparing us for overseas work, which worked on health for all in the 80s and 90s, and this was considered really revolutionary, that people could develop their own health systems, work within them, design them, and then create the care for their neighbourhoods or their countries. And what I found missing in the NHS was the involvement and the empowerment factor. And like many who'd stuck their hands up at the beginning, it felt an outsider and also maybe a bit of a rebel, in the wrong place.
So it's really kind of really resonated with you. That's really great to hear. And I know, because we've had a little kind of pre-preparation, that you've made a really interesting NHS Change Day pledge. So do you want to tell us a tiny little bit about that? And crucially, how your learning from the school is going to help you achieve the pledge?
The learning from the school has brought so much to me in terms of different models and series that I didn't know about. I was kind of educated on the Paulo Freire kind of start grassroots literacy, and what I've done, I've stepped right out of my comfort zone and founded a small soon-to-be charity called Health Hum, which is Health and Humanitarian, the shorthand. And we're going to be looking at food literacy and health using grassroots networking rather than having a solid structure, because what you taught me was that we can connect socially across every kind of divide and every hierarchy that we live in or every social set that we live in. Social media is taking us beyond that, and the reach of the school has certainly, I mean, it's got revolutionary potential, really. So Health Hum is going to be working on networks. So the first thing we're asking people for is their networks, not their money, because you might know somebody who's got a charitable giving scheme at their HR departments, but you personally can't give us 200 quid. So that sort of thing. We're looking at networks and skills and expertise.
Okay. Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you so much, Liz. And so really talking about how to use your strong and weak ties.
Yeah, exactly.
To move things forward. Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much. I'm going to talk to Tony now, who has been watching Twitter avidly this morning, and hopefully is going to give us a few little insights of what's been happening so far, Tony.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
We can, thank you.
Right, I think one of the nicest things that came up right at the start of the day was try to be excited about as many things as possible. And there certainly do seem to be lots of people being excited about many things out there. The next obvious thing really was the global nature of the conversation that we've got going over the last five weeks. So from West Coast to East Coast to Scandinavia to the UK and further, which is wonderful. I was really interested to see a theme in the first half of this around people power, around change coming from within, about the need to use head and heart, about how it's about self, the need to set the stage for change, and the value in that case of the models and tools that we've covered so far that people have gone through. And coming down to acknowledgement of a need people were expressing to reframe their own mindset and model of themselves, understanding of their self and reform themselves as a radical, a sort of alchemical transformation, so that they can actually then get outside of their comfort zone. And that acceptance
really interesting. Yeah. Sorry, Tony, I was just going to say, all routes lead back to change starts with me. By the sound of it. Yes. Okay, lovely. Thank you so much, Tony. I'm just going to go over to Liz now and just hear a little bit more about what's been happening on the chat. Morning, Liz.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Jenny. A lot of really interesting stuff on the chat. My first comment would be there's a real celebratory feel to it, and that came about from some of the early postings, which were all about the fact that today is the last day of winter, and tomorrow is the first day of spring. And so it feels like everybody's got a kind of a spring in their step and a real sense of actually stepping off and going into the next phase. In terms of the content, there was a huge amount of interest in the Peter Fuda model, with a lot of people commenting about how they're actually using it. So we'll have a look at some of that after this session and see how we can collate that. Again, as we've had every week, lots of lovely quotes and references with people commenting on other people's quotes and building on people's quotes. And some very supportive comments and feedback for Lana and Susan in the last little session. And just a lovely observation by Deborah, which I'll just share in case people missed it. She talked about the importance of transformational conversations, and that as radicals, we set the stage for effectiveness by creating change with our heads and hearts, with people informed by models and evidence. So a really lovely way of pulling together what we do, but how we do it, and how this school has developed and worked over the last few weeks.
Thank you so much, Liz. And I just want to say it's just lovely to have such clever people and insightful people working with us. And I'm going to finish there and hand back over to Helen, who's going to take us through our next section of content. Back to you, Helen.
Thank you, Jenny. And here I am again. And what we're going to do now is we're going to talk about, from the edge. What next in terms of change leadership, radicals, what do we think the emerging direction is? And this is like just my personal view, really. So let's talk about, from the edge. So when we say about, being on the edge, what do we mean? And I think we can interpret it in quite a number of different ways. We can think about it in terms of actually as health and care radicals working at the edge of our organisations. And again, a lot of evidence, particularly around the disruptive innovation field, that really radical thinking doesn't typically start in the centre of an organisation. It starts on the edge. So, how can we position ourselves as health and care radicals on the edge so that we can see the potential and we can make connections that we couldn't do if we were in the centre of the organisation? Being at the edge is also about taking responsibility for ourselves and staying at the edge of, what's current practice, what's current knowledge about change. Okay, who knows what? What direction should I be going in? Where do I need to go? And being on the edge can also be about, taking risks, like this guy here with his chairs, and role modelling, signal generating, demonstrating courage to think and to do things in new ways. And I think all those are part of, moving forward on the edge. And I think there's another way of thinking about the edge. And we've definitely had a very musical flavour last week, and we've already started this morning. So I was inspired, actually, by a tweet I received earlier this morning. So I put this in at the last minute. And this came from Linda, and she said, our theme tune for today must be We're on the Edge of Glory. And maybe we are on the edge of glory, because I think if there's one thing about the School for Health and Care Radicals, it's the way in which it's kind of been a platform to bring a group of very, very amazing, committed, talented people together. And actually, if we can build on this and we can keep connecting and working with each other, then maybe we are on the edge of glory. Because when we think about where health and care is and the kind of challenges, that we face moving forward, then maybe actually we, as a community of health and care radicals, we've got some perspectives and some skills and some connections that actually are a big part of what the future needs. Maybe actually, we are part of the hope for the future. So I think we're on the edge in that way as well. If I could have the next slide. So let's talk a little bit about what's happening with change. And again, there are some very nice references and resources in the study guide this week. But, in overall terms, change is happening at a faster rate, and the kind of change that we're doing is much more disruptive, less incremental change. The problem that often we have is that many of the ways that our organisations go about change were designed for a different era, and with a different mindset and approach and a very different set of circumstances, particularly financial circumstances. And maybe, we're out of sync. It's also interesting, if you look at what futurists are saying about the nature of work, that complex work is actually getting much more complex. So it's becoming much harder to replicate. And when we look at the kind of, creative work and innovation, it's happening at a faster and faster rate. And I want to come on a minute and talk about the difference between tacit and explicit knowledge. But explicit knowledge is when we pull out learning and we create, instruction manuals and best practice databases. Okay, that's explicit knowledge. What it's trying to do is trying to pull together and summarise, how to make things work well. And I think what we're saying is this world that we're moving into is a world where that kind of explicit knowledge, okay, is going to be less and less helpful. And we've got to be building tacit knowledge, which is the kind of which happens in different ways. And again, from Module 1, we talked about this new world, and we talked about the dominant approach, which is about hierarchy and logic and doing, as opposed to being and seeing, and tried and tested and best practice. And we talked about the emerging direction, which is about how we build community, how power comes through connection, that actually to be a really great change agent is very little to do with positional authority, and actually it's to do with our ability to connect with and network with others. So, just thinking forward into this emerging direction and this brave new world, what are some of the opportunities for us? So I want to return to this issue about tacit knowledge and explicit knowledge, because I think it's really important. And so tacit knowledge is the kind of knowledge we do by learning. It's about, Lana in her workplace making changes and trying new ways of doing things and building her own knowledge and learning by doing. Okay? And the thing about tacit knowledge, it's where the action is. It's and when we're talking about the results and the changes that we're trying to deliver and the benefits that we're trying to achieve for our patients and citizens, it's the people with the tacit knowledge who deliver the results. But we want to massively spread can I go back to my previous slide? Thanks. Next one, 37. Okay, next one, sorry. That's it, yeah. The only way that we can share this really broadly, which is what we need to do if we're going to create very, very big change, is by actually by turning it into explicit knowledge. So I think we as change agents have got a very important role at the boundary between tacit knowledge, learning by doing, and explicit knowledge, learning by sharing. It's a very, very difficult thing to do. A lot of organisations, including health and care organisations, spend a lot of money and a lot of effort, trying to create this shared learning and capture learning. But very often it doesn't get shared and it doesn't get applied. It's very few organisations succeed at doing this. So what might we do? Next slide, please. So, one thing is to say, well, people can go on the internet, knowledge is everywhere, and, we can find lots of things. But getting information off the internet is like trying to drink a cup of water from a fire hydrant. There's so much of it. What on earth do we do? If I have the next slide. And we also know that this tacit knowledge, the way it's best developed is through conversations and social relationships. And look at, on these web seminars, how that tacit knowledge has been flowing at a phenomenal rate. It's about a community of people, who want to create change, connecting and talking with each other. So I actually think that, if I could have the next slide, that for us as health and care radicals, I think that there are two very big opportunities that we need to focus on. The first, again, this relates back to something that we said in Module 1, where we talked about being bridge builders between disconnected groups, and we said that those change leaders who create the biggest change are able to actually to build bridges between groups who are currently disconnected. And very often as change agents we could become an army of doers, and maybe actually if we became an army of people who actually connect other people with each other, who have got similar goals and can learn from each other's tacit knowledge, that's a very, very powerful thing. And the second thing is that, in a world where knowledge is becoming more and more important, I think there is a very big role around curating knowledge. And we think about curators often in the context of like people that work in libraries or museums who kind of curate the content and make sense of it. Well, we've got to be that as well. And if I could have the next slide. So one of the things that I put in the study guide for this week is some of the work of Harold Jarch, and I think he's doing the most interesting thinking around how change agents create knowledge for the future. And this is his model, and he talks about, seeking knowledge, but making sense of knowledge and sharing it. So actually the seeking activities tend to be quite low value because there's so much stuff out there. But if we as change agents can kind of make sense of it, create a reality around it, link it back to the very real situations that we're in, and we can then share it with other people through appropriate processes, then I think, we're really onto something. And I think this is an area where at the leading edge of change leadership, we need to be focusing as we move forward. And if I could have the next slide. So in terms of what I'm going to be doing over the next period, I'm going to be working as part of a special group that's being set up within NHS Improving Quality, which is the national improvement body in England. And we're setting up a group called the Horizons Group. And what this is about, it's about this work. How do we stimulate approaches to change that are new and are disruptive, and how do we operate at the edge of current thinking and practice? And in a sense, we're about skipping a generation. How might we skip a generation of thinking about how to create change at scale? How might we skip a generation in terms of the new people that we're connecting with? And, particularly focusing on emerging leaders, clinical trainees, students, many of the people who are in the school. Not exclusively, but, connecting, in a sense, with a new generation of ideas. And how do we work with the kind of change methods that emerging generation work with? Again, building on our existing change. But, the kind of methods that they use around open innovation, open source, social media, and the newer techniques like crowdsourcing and hackathons, and how, in a sense, we take those and we make sense of them and we share them in healthcare moving forward. And then, just finally, just to say, what next for the School for Health and Care Radicals? So we've got a lot of thinking and reflecting and evaluating to do after this kind of crazy 5-week journey. And one of the things that I'm going to say at the end is about the potential to become a certificated change agent. And, in terms of us evaluating the school, the number of people that actually take this right the way through at the end and can demonstrate learning is really important to us. So kind of watch this space in terms of what happens with the school. But I think the big opportunity for us as the Horizons Group is to link the kind of processes of the school with wider processes around connecting, around tacit knowledge, around bridge building and connecting. So watch this space. So I'm now going to hand over to Pip, who's going to take us through our second panel discussion with some members of our community who have gone beyond the edge already.
Thank you, Helen. Good morning, everybody. I hope you can hear me. So I'd like to begin by introducing our first panelist, Nick. Both of these panelists have been with us on all of the sessions, and I think both of them have been magicians in their own ways, bringing about incredible changes in their organizations. So, Nick, thank you ever so much for joining us this morning. Can we hear you?
You can, yes.
Wonderful. So please tell us a little bit about some of the incredible work that you've been doing and how you've been going beyond the edge.
Yeah, okay. My background as a change specialist has come from both inside and outside the NHS. I'm not a lifer in the NHS. I've been in the NHS for about 7 or 8 years now. I've been involved in a number of change initiatives, I say, both in and outside. And the ones that I've been part of within the NHS, I haven't actually had no prior specialist knowledge of the areas I've worked in. Some people will see that as a negative, but I've always seen it as a positive because I've been able to ask the difficult questions from a place of curiosity and inquiry in a challenging but supportive manner. I'd just like to tell you about an episode a number of years ago when I was working at a major acute trust. I was faced with a particularly challenging situation. I was brought into the organisation specifically to try and revitalise a major change initiative that was already in place across a large clinical unit, but which had stalled. I was asked to come in and shake things up, actually be a radical, and to try and engage the management and the staff and to reconnect them to the strategic direction, and basically act, in their words, as a catalyst for change. The challenge was that the environment I stepped into, really I could only describe it as being quite toxic at the time, with a multiple dysfunctional relationships ranging from lack of trust between the management and staff to really isolating and threatening environment between members of the senior management team. So it wasn't a pleasant environment to step into, to say the least. The range of challenges that I faced were immense across the areas, dealing with things like real organisational, structural and cultural issues, personal issues between individuals within the senior management team, and a small matter of how to transform the service to deliver a multi-million-pound savings. So that was the easy bit. The traditional approach to these challenges... Sorry?
That's quite a task you faced.
Yes, yeah, it was no small task. And I think, to be honest with you, obviously the traditional way, and we've talked about a lot of this today, would be to look at the doing, to try and look at things on sequential order. So how do we do this, how do we do others, and how do we move things forward? And I think that was not going to work in this situation. And if only life was so simple to just plan things out and do it, but actually it is if we focus on the doing, because we just map it out, put it on a project plan, and it's sorted. Not. So where did I have to put my efforts? I looked at it and I thought, actually, I've got to take people outside their comfort zones. It needs to be big enough to capture people's attention, but tangible so people could connect with it and stay connected. So my first major piece of work was I organised a series of change conversations with the key influencers. And this was staff across all levels. It wasn't just going to the senior managers or the people who spoke loudest. It was looking across all levels across the unit, which I shared with them this model that you can see in front, which is the 7 stages of change. We began to explore how the current landscape looked. And we looked at it from a personal perspective, from a people perspective, rather than trying to focus on what are the problems in the system. We were on the edge of a precipice. So I worked with them on a personal and professional level to challenge and support them, to enable them to understand that it was about seeing themselves and others people, and to recognise and acknowledge the change journey that they and others were either embarking on, had been on, and it was okay to look at things in a different way. I was quite frank with them, and that I needed to be them to engage and to motivate it, because they were important people in this, and it wasn't going to work without them. We needed to look at the wider teams who were willing to get involved, and to positive challenge those who were acting as disruptors, to try and just reconnect staff back to the bigger goal that we were trying to achieve, and to actually get some momentum back in the system, and to look at how we could deliver the changes that needed to happen to sustain the service. This took place. This wasn't something that happened on day 1 or 2. This took place over a number of months and was challenging, to say the least, with as many failures as successes. And again, I think that was quite important to emphasise when in the first thing, because the failures were as important. But at the end, we'd successfully challenged the behaviours across the unit, which were acting as blockers to where we were trying to get to. And over the next year or so, we went on many journeys through the stages of change. And again, we went through this on a number of occasions. We might get to stage 3, drop back to stage 1, move on. It wasn't a linear process. Again, it's about the thing with models are great, but you need to work with them as you can. So basically, it didn't automatically move back to the edge, but people got to the edge, but we could show people how to move beyond the edge. I finished with this slide borrowed from Naomi's news email a few weeks ago. I'll leave you with this quote from a favourite. It's from the Gladiator film, you remember, but there was the Roman general Marcus Aurelius. And he basically said, everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. And everything we see is a perspective and not the truth. And I think it ties very much back into Helen's quote about the Spanish poem about the lenses that you're looking through and how you see things. I hope you found that interesting.
It's really helpful. Nick, thank you so much for sharing those with us, and I hope that the changes that you've managed to instigate in the organisation are still bearing fruit for everyone who works there. So we'd like to move on now to hear from Carol Reid. Carol, are you there? I know it looks like you're there. Can we hear you, Carol? Are you there? So it's our day for technical challenges, and the magic isn't working quite as well as it might do. I'm just trying to think whether maybe I should try and say a little bit about Carol's innovation, because it's such an inspiring one. And if Carol can't tell you about it, I think maybe I would like to just tell you a little bit about it. Carol and I had a conversation on Monday, and she started off by saying to me, I don't really know any more about face cream than any other woman, but when I noticed that the people in our burns unit and in our plastic surgery unit were actually experiencing huge benefits from our sunflower cream that we used, it occurred to me that we should try to do something a bit more with it. Could we move on to the next slide, please? And these are the bits that I probably won't be able to tell you quite as much about as Carol could herself, so I'll kind of skip through some of these. But what she's done is actually, they've taken the sunflower cream that they noticed was making a huge difference to people who had suffered from very bad burns and had surgery and scars and things, and they've managed to start selling it, packaging it and selling it to the hospital. All of the profits go back to improving patient care. What I think Carol particularly wanted to tell you about was the way in which she's been able to embrace social networking, and particularly Twitter. So maybe actually go back to the previous slide, by letting people know about what they can do using the NHS Change model and tweeting about her pledge to get other people to join her pledge. And they're now managing to actually emulate this kind of work in different hospitals around the country. So not only are patients benefiting from it, but also all of the proceeds go back into improving patient care. And what she ended up by telling me was, because I said, so Carol, do you actually use this cream yourself? And she said, oh yes, she said, you should feel how soft my skin is. So I think her story for me was a really inspirational one about how the power of social networking can actually help to spread innovation in a really significant way, and that many other hospitals around the country are now able to share the experience and benefit patients in a number of ways. So if we are able to get Carol back a bit later on in the call, I'm sure she would like to tell you a bit more about this herself. But in the meantime, I just would really like to thank both Carol and Nick for sharing their stories with us, and I think hopefully offering some inspiration to other radicals on the school about how even starting with something small and being bold, going a bit beyond the edge and thinking perhaps we could do this a little bit differently, can actually have enormous impact on many other people. So thank you, and I'm going to hand back now to Helen.
Thank you, Pip, and thank you, Nick, and by proxy, Carol. So what I wanted to do now was, as we're kind of drawing to the close of this term of the school, I just wanted to give you some of my own reflections on it. So what I have now is 8 things that I've learned from this experience of the School for Health and Care Radicals. So the first thing is, what it gives me an absolute sense of is this like massive, untapped kind of source of power and energy and talent for change, and how outstanding the potential of that is. And I think, so much of this is about our ability to kind of to bridge disconnected groups, because I think actually that's what the School for Health and Care Radicals has done kind of better than anything really, is to make that, is to bridge and create a community around people who were previously disconnected. And I think, we are the future. Okay, we are part of the hope of health and care, and we really need to build on that. And I agree, I put Linda in there again, we are on the edge of glory. The second thing is that, if you think about the School for Health and Care Radicals as a kind of change initiative, it has definitely been emergent. So, we've never done anything like this before, and it was, through Change Day that we wanted to do it. What we've basically found is that our core audience, and there's an absolute hardcore of about 250 people who, are coming on the modules, live ones regularly, and combining that with a number of modules that they're watching recordings from. But generally, the essence of why we set up the school was for frontline staff who felt they needed permission and couldn't make change, and it was about tactics. Actually, in terms of who the kind of core audience of the school is, it's a more expert audience and it's more specialist. So lots of people who are, like Nick and Carol, are, and Susan and Lana, everybody who's spoken today, who have got a lot of experience as leaders of change. And, not all but many are people for whom being an improvement leader or a change facilitator is either their full-time job or a big part of their job. So what it's basically meant is that we've had to rewrite a lot of things. And particularly in terms of what I've done with content, it's really kept me on my toes. Because what we've ended up presenting, it became very obvious, like from Module 1 onwards, that this audience wanted something that was more challenging. And I think it isn't a bad thing. What it's basically saying to me is that there haven't really been mechanisms to bring us together as a community of change agents. And we've got it now. And I think another thing that's been really lovely about it is we're still getting, much of the initial audience that we wanted, but because of the relationships that are forming, a lot of the people that are more expert are advising the people that are less expert. And, this buzzy tacit knowledge exchange is going on kind of like at turbo pace. The third thing is, the most important need, yes, the content's important, but it's about connection and community. And it's about, people coming together and learning from each other. Number 4, I think we've learned a lot about the relationship between tacit and explicit knowledge. And in a sense, the lectures are explicit, but they are also tacit in a sense that they're based on like years and years of people that are experienced and change agents. But then the actual process that happens on the live sessions and the knowledge sharing that's going on and the sources of really interesting information that are getting shared and the way that people are helping each other, I think has been very, very powerful. It seems to us that the best experience is synchronous in time, like where a group of people come together, but asynchronous in location. And what we mean by that is we set a whole series of things up at the start of the school. So we built like a web forum. But people aren't very keen on going on a web forum in a asynchronous, different people at different times. But like when people are focused on the school, like on the web lectures or on the tweet chat, then we're fully engaged and we're fully present and we're really connecting. But outside of that, we connect less and there's less pull to do that. It's interesting because when we talk about synchronous in time, that doesn't just mean synchronous in terms of the people on the live web chat. It's also synchronous in time when people come together, like we're going to hear from the New Zealand group, or about the New Zealand group, who meet on Tuesdays together. We've got the group in Cheshire that do this together. And I think that synchronicity when people come and connect together is really important. I think one of the things that's been absolutely fantastic is the global connection. And people from 26 different countries registered for the school. And I think we've just gained so much from that. Number 7 is about all teach, all learn. This isn't, and I really hope it doesn't come across like this, a group of, there's people that are experts and people that are less expert. But in a sense, everybody has got things to teach and to share. And we all need to learn. And I really hope that we've built a spirit of that. And I think one of the great things about the school is so many extra resources and extra perspectives have come forward that, if we do the school again, we've got so much more tacit knowledge and experience and great sources, to use next time. And then, finally, we need to move forward, and we do need to move forward to glory. We do need to take this and, turn it into something that really makes a difference for patients and service users and communities. And we need to reflect on it in terms of the next phase. So I've had a great experience in terms of the School for Health and Care Radicals, and having to constantly rewrite the modules every single week because our audiences needed something different, means I have not had the kind of most stress-free time of my working life. But, you know, it's been fantastic, and long may it continue. So, back to Liz.
Thank you, Helen. So I'm going to now put my three speakers, Loy, Shu Kong and Lin, on standby. So what I want to do in this little section is just give you some feedback from some of the communities that have formed, a couple of which Helen's already mentioned, and some of the pairings that have been that have developed. Some of these people, obviously Loy, Shu Kong and Lin are going to speak, but also I've got some feedback from some others. So I'm going to start with Ubukan and Helen, and they're not able to join us today, but they have given me a little bit of feedback. Ubukan on the left is the mentee, and Helen is the mentor. So they've never actually met, but they meet virtually. And some of the things that they've said is that Ubukan wanted motivation and inspiration from their relationship. She agreed as a result of the relationship to speak at a conference about being a radical, and several people gave feedback about how inspiring she was, and that provided her with some real hope. And what they had a meeting earlier this week, and what they've agreed is that whilst the materials from the school have really helped to provide a starting point for their conversations with each other and with others, and they've established a way of maintaining the relationship as they continue their journey via email and Skype. So that feels like a really great relationship, and we'll be following it as we move forward. There's been a group down in New Zealand, so they've been one of these groups that have been meeting in same time, same place, but not at the same time as us. So they meet on a Tuesday, and what they do is they play the live lecture back together because of the time difference, and then they have a learning session around that. And I've noticed today that we've got Priyesh actually on the live lecture, who is part of this group, and I was able, because I knew that this group existed, to hook Priyesh in with them. And so they're all learning together. So this is who they all are. Lynn Ma at the top, I'll point out, used to work with us in the NHS Institute, and so she's been great to pull everybody together. And Alex Nicholas, who's to the left of Lynn, is a trained community organiser who went through Marshall Gantz's training and is working really closely with them around community organising. So the purpose of the group is to improve personal practice of their community organising skills and to develop a group of community organising leaders. But they also want to contextualise the learning from the programme within their own roles, work and community in New Zealand, and then use that to increase the awareness for community organising approaches. What they've learned together, and I'll just pick a couple of these, as a group we've been able to talk about the concepts, share each of our own learning and put it into our own context here in Auckland, and we're beginning to appreciate the importance of a community of radicals to sustain and encourage each other as we articulate organisational heritage. So our next pairing is Susan and Loy. Susan and Loy are a mentor-mentee. Susan isn't able to join us as the mentor, but I've got Loy online. So hopefully you're there, Loy. Can I say hello to you?
Oh, hi.
Hi, Loy. You very kindly sent through yourself and Susan what you said was your learning from the relationship. And it's about how you can both learn from each other, that the connections need to survive beyond the duration of the modules, and that creating a thriving network of radicals could exert a significant force for change. And I'd be most interested in hearing your thoughts about that second point. So how do you as an individual plan to make this happen, and how can Susan help you with that?
Well, actually, the roles are reversed. I'm actually the mentor in this relationship.
Oh, okay, my apologies.
No worries. But as I said, we're both learning from it, because both Susan and I, on our first call, we probably spoke for nearly an hour about the shared experience we've both had on living at the edge. And we've been at the edge of a big change that is happening and has been happening for the past 10 years or so. And that was really important for us to understand that we had a common purpose and a common vision for what we were doing in health and care. And that's really helped us understand what we're going to try and achieve through this relationship. We're going to speak regularly. We've connected on LinkedIn. We've already exchanged quite a few emails. And the best thing is, yesterday, I think I found a project that we could work on together. So I've reached out to Susan, and we'll probably meet in the next 2 or 3 weeks for the first time and see if there's this opportunity for us to work together.
Lloyd, that's fantastic, and we really do look forward to hearing more about this as we move forward, because we're trying to work a way of how do we maintain all of the connections between all of the mentors and mentees. So thank you very much for giving us that feedback. I just want to mention another of the groups, which, as Helen mentioned, is the Cheshire and Merseyside Clinical Support Unit. From left to right here, we see John Holden, Jane Hayes-Green, Mark Jones, Stephanie Chu, and Simon Platt. They've been doing some of these calls as a group. Today they're actually all remote, but I know a number of them are on the call. So it's great to see you all together and to hear about what you've been doing. And just some feedback from them. They've uploaded the Radical School content and narrative onto their own electronic shared space. It offers potential for what they can do next. They see it very much as having been a massive enabler. And their ambition for next year, which I love, is to provide health and care case studies for next year's programme. So that's Cheshire and Merseyside. And I'm now going to talk to my final two panellists, who are Shu Kong and Lynn. Shu Kong is on the left with her great selfie sitting there next to her school slide. And Lynn is on the right. Shu Kong is the mentee and Lynn is the mentor. And hopefully you're both live. So welcome, Shu Kong and Lynn.
Hello, Liz. Hello, everyone.
Hi. So Shu Kong, let me start with you. So what do you hope to gain from your mentoring relationship with Lynn?
So I really wanted perspectives from someone who's got loads of experiences in the NHS, because I'm a graduate management trainee, so I'm very new to the NHS. And I wanted to compare my thoughts with someone who's been through a lot of change already. I also wanted to get some information on what's happening in other trusts as well. And I wanted to share specifically my thoughts about my learnings with someone and to get feedback, which has helped shape my learnings quite a lot.
Great, thank you, Shu Kong. And Lynn, what's worked well for you and Shu Kong in this process so far?
Well, first, can I say thank you to that positive feedback from Shu Kong, because I hadn't known how it had landed. But the unique issue that struck me was that we had an immediate bond. There was an immediate trust, because my understanding was we were both coming from a place where we wanted to contribute to positive change in the NHS. So what helped was the introduction by the school. I wouldn't have met Shu Kung otherwise, and it gave us permission to speak to each other. We had a common language. It was an unexpected contact, and yet we're facing similar challenges despite the differences in our experience and background and situation.
That's great. Thank you very much, Lynn. So, Shu Kong, let me come back to you then. So what tips would you give to other learners embarking on a mentoring relationship?
So I think to ask as many questions as possible, and to share your thoughts and gain some feedback from it, from someone who's got different perspectives. That's really been very helpful. And to make the most of having someone there who's been very supportive to help you.
Shu Kong and Lynn, thank you both so very much for that really useful and helpful thoughts and feedback. And I'm just going to share some other emerging themes and feedback that have been coming back to me from the various mentoring relationships. A lot of people are saying that the pace of work is making it difficult to prioritise, but it's great to see that that's not an issue for everybody, or that people are finding a way around that. And I've been very privileged to be copied into some of the emails that have been exchanging. And I saw one the other day where the mentee said to the mentor, "I'm here for anything that you need." And then again, I'm keeping on top of the education through the PowerPoints and enjoying what I'm reading. And I was personally thanked for my matchmaking skills, which I think is quite funny. But very much that people are looking forward to this being a positive and beneficial experience, which we've just heard from Loy, Lynn, and Shu Kong. And my final slide is just a picture of one of the other groups, which is the Health and Education West Midlands, who get together every week and to actually think through how they're going to take the learning and move forward as a support group and a support network. So I'm going to hand back now to Helen.
Thank you, Liz. And if I could have the next slide, that was fantastic, and got a real sense of connection there, which is fabulous. Yeah, can I have the next slide? So like, what next really? So we hope that that lots of you will want to carry on with this process and gain a certificate as a health and care change agent. So we've sent you, details of this, but we want to make it the process as straightforward as possible. So basically, all you need to do is to get your pledge on the Change Day website, watch all 5 modules, and then there's a very straightforward pro forma to fill in, maximum of 1,000 words. And all we're looking for is evidence that you have learned from the 5 modules and applied it to your Change Day pledge. And you've got up until the 31st of March to get these back to Naomi. And then what will happen is that we're setting up an assessment committee, okay? And we will look at all the submissions. But providing you can show evidence of learning and applying that knowledge to the actioning of your Change Day pledge, then you'll get through this process fine. And what we want to do is to recognise people that have done this, that have made the investment in these 5 modules and shown their ability to apply it in actioning their Change Day pledge. We actually want to recognise you as a certificated change agent. So we will give you, a certificate, which will be from NHS Improving Quality and the School for Health and Care Radicals. And the other thing that we will award you, which is really cool, is that we will give you a virtual badge. And this is what the virtual badge will look like. And you can put it on your email signature. You can put it when you send letters to people. You can put it on your personal website, but it will be your badge. And then we're also going to run some virtual graduation ceremonies. And if you're in the UK, we will also send you a framed certificate. And if you're outside of the UK, we will send you a virtual certificate, an electronic one. So I really hope, that lots of you will carry on and do this. Then the other thing that's happening is that we will, obviously, I think we need to have a little rest. And we've got Change Day on Monday, so I think we'll have the rest after that. And what we'll do is we'll reflect on, how the school has been. We'll ask everybody to fill in an evaluation form, everybody that's registered. And what we'll do is that we'll judge the success of the school, not on, did everybody go for certification, but we'll judge it in terms of what people wanted from the school. So people that just wanted to look at the material and see if it was interesting and download it, and if the school gave them that because that's what they wanted, then that's success as far as we're concerned. But we kind of want to get a sense of that, and we'll do a proper formal evaluation of the school, and we'll ask you to help us with that. And obviously, I think what we've got here, and many of you are saying this in the chat, is the core of a really great community. And I really hope that we'll be able to keep that going. So when we're actually planning what we're going to do as part of the Horizons group and how we'll connect and how we'll support each other on tacit knowledge, our thinking about how we take this work forward and how we keep these connections growing and sustained, will be at the heart of that. And whatever we do, we will co-create together with this community of learners. So I hope that you will apply to be a certificated change agent with a virtual badge, which is really cool. And I hope that you'll stay engaged with us as we collectively work out what the right thing is to do next. So watch this space, except that sounds a bit passive. Yeah, please stay engaged and please get more engaged. So on we go.
So, hello everyone, it's Pip again. It has fallen to me to kind of finish off this last module on the last day, and I think we all here in Coventry are feeling a bit sad, really, and not quite sure what we're going to do with ourselves for the next few weeks. But I wanted to share with you just a few of the pledges that people have been making that have struck us as being particularly lovely. I'm not going to read them all because I think you're all pretty capable of doing that, but I think my favourite ones are about listening and hearing the unspoken. That seems to be such an important thing. And reflecting on every day, having a best moment. I love that idea. It's so easy to concentrate on the negative. Pledging to speak the truth, even if my voice shakes. I think that was on one of Helen's slides in the very first module. So that's a lovely one for us all to remember. And I'm hoping that you've all made at least one pledge, if not more. So if we could have the next slide, please. We'd just like to remind you of the call to action for this week, and encourage you to think about what effort would be required on your part to action your Pledge for Change Day, and also to do the follow-up work for certification. We do hope you will actually get your virtual badge and become a certificated change agent. Why would it be particularly helpful for you to be a certificated change agent? And who might you need to help you with the process? You might like to get in touch with Matchmaker Liz, and she can hook you up with someone who could help you. And so finally then, if we could move on to the next slide, your questions for reflection for this week and the following weeks are to encourage you and invite you to think about how you can move in the direction of change in ways that will help you bring about the change you want to see, or even the change you want to be in the world. How can you build on your experiences of this call for health and care radicals? And how will you go forward to build networks and communities in support of the changes you want to see? So I hope that you will give those some thought. We do actually have a couple of minutes left, amazingly. So I would love to leave you with a poem which I hope will inspire you to continue to be positive. The poem is called "Everything is Going to Be All Right." Why should I not be glad to contemplate the clouds clearing beyond the dormer window and the high tide reflecting on the ceiling? There will be dying, there will be crying, but there is no need to go into that. The poems will flow from the heart unbidden, and the hidden source is the watchful heart. The sun will rise despite everything, and the far cities are beautiful and bright. I lie here in a riot of sunlight, watching the daybreak and the clouds flying. Everything is going to be all right. So thank you all very much for joining us. I hope you have good days, good weeks, and we look forward to hearing from you and staying connected with you all. Thank you and goodbye.